Hope you're having a great weekend, great morning. We appreciate you joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short of Welcome Home Financial Partners. WelcomeHomeFP.com is the website. Find out more about Ralph, Tim, the entire team at Welcome Home Financial Partners. Set up a time to speak with them as well. You can also reach out via phone, 804-635-3550. That's the number once again, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Vaughn. Got a lot we're going to cover today on the show, but before we dive into it, let me check in. As always, pleased to be joined by the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph and Tim. Glad to be with you. How are you?
Doing good, Chris. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. We were talking earlier about you took a little time off, got to travel for a little while, and enjoying warmer temperature. Got a little bit of color on you. Coming back to colder weather and pollen, bit of a shock. Kind of a parallel in retirement. It's not always going to be 70, 75 and sunny. You're going to have those 20-degree days. You're going to have those wet days, and what you really want to do is develop a plan that's going to get you through it. You know that when it gets colder, you pull out the hoodie, you pull out the sweatshirt or whatever. When the markets take a downturn, well, we're going to talk about that here on the show. Let's start by talking about working. Obviously, people retire from something. At a lot of big companies, they're telling employees they need to return to the office, even though it's estimated that more than 32 million Americans are still going to work remotely this year. And some of them have resorted to cheating at working remotely using things like mouse jigglers, auto typing bots, even fake Zoom activity simulators to show that they're busy. They're actually online when they're doing Lord knows what. It sounds similar to when people think that they're preparing for retirement simply by contributing to a 401k. That is certainly a portion of it. But what do you see that they don't with that mindset?
Well, I think, there's a lot of people around that say, hey, I'm stashing money away. That's my retirement savings, this, that, and the other. And I think that's where people fall short of, not really having any kind of strategy behind other than just socking away money. We see it quite a bit where people are using the pre-tax options, the traditional side of the 401k versus the Roth and after tax. So, it's not as simple as just saying, hey, I'm putting money away into this pot. And, especially right now, there's been so much volatility in the market. You might not have quite as much as you had originally anticipated, especially if you're planning on retiring right now. So I think, for most people out there needs to be some strategy behind the 401k and not just socking away the money for retirement, because retirement is going to be about the income. And I think that's where a lot of people do fall short.
But I would say to anybody that is putting money away, kudos to you, because guess what? There's a lot of people out there that's not doing that, expecting to have a good retirement without making any plans for it. So like I say, congratulations on at least you taking the first step and putting money away, because that is really dependent upon you, how your retirement income is going to look like based on how much money you put away, where it is. But that's not just your retirement income plan. That's just basically an investment statement saying, this is how much I've got today. And like Tim said, we're living in a volatile time. Just so far this year, the S&P 500 has dropped about 14%, where the Dow's dropped about 10% since the first of the year. So in the last 4 months, things have definitely made quite a bit difference and change in your philosophy about 401ks. And if you're looking at that every day, you're probably scared to death about whether you can retire or not. So like I say, this is not your plan. This is just how much you have in your 401k. So what is your plan and what is your strategy? You agree, Tim?
Yeah, and I think, the kudos go out to everybody who is saving in the 401k. And 401k is a great tool to use because the contribution limits are much higher than just your standalone Roth IRA or traditional IRA or what have you. But I think a lot of people need to focus in on what other options are out there, because taxes really erode a lot of things in retirement, especially, we talked about the traditional side, the pre-tax side. If that's all you're using and tax rates increase, well, we might have some issues when it comes to what we get to keep as far as income versus what we have to pay out for taxes. That's very often overlooked. But, if you're able to contribute, the max into your 401k, why not look at other vehicles such as, different brokerage accounts or what have you, especially if you want to retire early. If you want to retire early, there's options out there because there's going to be limitations as far as your traditional or your Roth IRAs or your 401k as far as distribution amounts. So, those are things to take a look at. But people also don't really seek the advice, and they're just picking and choosing like target dated funds inside their 401k. Well, the issue with that is you've got a lot of fees associated with that too that you got to pay attention to. So, it's very easy just to say, hey, I'm going to stick in, $30,000 or what have you, and an annual contribution into your 401k, but you've got to make sure that there is a strategy, because the worst thing you can do is pick and choose the investments, 30, 40 years ago. And now it's just maintaining itself. And now that strategy might not be the right strategy moving forward.
And I would say to a lot of people, you just need to kind of understand that those strategies may not be exactly what you're looking for. And how do you know? Have you had anybody to sit down with you and say, hey, what is your risk profile like? I mean, if you're 59 years old and want to retire in a couple of years, it should be a completely different strategy than if you were 29 years old. So those are some things that you kind of need to be prepared for. It's just not a template saying everybody should be in this because you're a certain age. I mean, we have clients here that, are 80 years old and they only believe in one thing, and that's in the stock market. And then we have some people who are 50 years old. They don't want to have anything to do with the stock market. So every person that comes into our office has a different philosophy. And we try to basically, when we do our roadmap, give them the strategies based on what they're trying to do, not what their neighbor's trying to do or not what their coworker's trying to do. And that's the other thing that you need to be aware of is, guess what? Everybody's different. Your retirement plan should be different than, well, mine's going to be different than Tim's. I mean, because Tim's going to play golf all the time like you, Chris, and I'm not going to play golf that much. So everybody's different. So that's the thing with our roadmap is let's take a look at you and you alone, what your expenses are like. How much do you need? I mean, there's one thing about talking about, you got to have $1 million or $2 million, ever who you listen to, they'll tell you a different thing. But if you've done a good job in not having a lot of expenses in your retirement, you may not need that much. I would say this, I mean, there's clients that come in that will tell us that they can't retire. And when we go through our roadmap, they've done a good job in their expenses, and they may only have $300,000 or $400,000 in their retirement accounts. But guess what? They don't have any expenses, no mortgages, no credit card debt, anything like that. So it doesn't take a lot because some of them have a pension that will, between pension and Social Security, will pay for everything they need to do. So they still have that $300,000 sitting over here to do other things that they hadn't planned on. So it really depends on that individual and what they're trying to do, because do you want to live the lifestyle of your neighbors, or do you want to live the lifestyle that you and your wife or your spouse always dreamed about?
Going on autopilot, like in work and kind of like in retirement, maybe not the best strategy out there. As you guys said, anyone who's contributing to a 401k, who is saving for retirement, fair play to them. And it's not to say that you're doing something wrong, but there could be things in there that you could be doing better. At the end of the day, you don't want to, there's nothing wrong with your retirement. You want that dynamic retirement that's made specifically for you. And that is where that roadmap comes back into play, because we're all starting from different locations, but the destination is the same. And that is to that hopefully enjoyable retirement that we all aspire for. So again, to begin that roadmap process, to sit down and speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, it's 804-635-3550, or going online to the website at welcomehomefp.com. Find out more about Ralph, Tim, the entire team, and set up that complimentary time to speak with them. welcomehomefp.com. Let's talk a little bit more about the 401ks, because it's true. However people are saving, millions depend on them to save for retirement. So no need for a financial advisor, right? Well, here's the thing. There was a recent survey that found that people who manage their own 401ks, they ran into investment options and fees they didn't understand. I know for a fact that when I first set out in the working world, I didn't know, which investments to look at in my 401k. And probably a lot of people who have elected to be in a 401k, they probably haven't changed those investment strategies that much. Those that worked with an advisor contributed more to their plans, and they felt more confident about retirement prospects. At what point should somebody who is going it alone with a 401k come and see you guys?
Well, I think, as you're approaching that retirement red zone that we talk so much about, but also too is, you want to make sure if you're working 30 or 40 years, you got to make sure that your money's working for you too.
Right.
The strategy that you deploy when you're 20 years old shouldn't be the same when you're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60. And I can keep on going up with numbers, but, the strategy should change along with your lifestyle. And I think, we see it quite a bit where most people think they're doing things right because they see their account grow. But what they're not anticipating is the amount of money that they're also contributing to it, plus hopefully a company match. And, we see it where, back in 2008, it went down, but I came back in the next few years. Well, you've got to really take a look at that as a whole and say, well, how much did you contribute? How much did your company contribute? And then how much was the actual return? So when you're in retirement, you're going to lose your company match and you're going to lose your contributions. So, if you're going to leave everything into the market or the same target dated fund or whatever fund that you may be using and things go awry, let's look at this year. A lot of things have changed really quickly. And really the biggest thing is just the uncertainty. Well, guess what? Even in good years, there's bad times. So you've got to make sure that you're addressing these issues. And you probably feel like there are no issues because, that number is increasing. But if you look at your statements today, I can assure you that they're probably not increasing. And now people are getting really anxious.
And I would say to a lot of people, retirement or retirement planning is kind of a scary thought because we aren't trained to do that during our working years because you're thrust into making sure that you keep your job by doing a good job at where you work, and you don't have the time and effort to put into that. So it's kind of scary, but the best thing for people to do is reach out to somebody. I don't believe that most plans have an advisor that can sit down with you and go through your options in a forthright way other than say, hey, here's your options, pick and choose what you want to do. When you come to us, we kind of sit down and go through a process that will allow you to see what you're trying to do, not somebody else. The other thing is this: are you fully trained on all the jargon that's thrown at you as far as the language within your 401k, which plans, what is a target date? Most people, they don't really understand what a target date fund. They just know that it's probably a little bit more conservative, but what is it about it reason that you want to choose it? That's the thing that professional fiduciaries give you the options to understand what it is that you're doing. Because I don't think people want to do something without understanding it at all, or at least understand a little bit about it, in my opinion. But that's the reason you have a financial fiduciary advisor, because you feel more confident about what you're doing. And with that confidence, you can sleep better at night. And if things take a turn like they have for the last few weeks, you can have somebody that holds your hand or talk you off the ledge, because the worst thing that you can do if you're trying to retire is to do something stupid that you're not able to recover, or it takes you a lot longer to recover. Okay. So that's the thing that we really bring to the fore table is, all right, if you have issues or if you have questions, give us a call. We'll hold your hand and try and explain through it. It's not going to be easy, but it's not as easy going alone. That's the thing that we bring to the table.
A lot of people, when things go south, they start selling out and getting out of the market because they want to stop the bleeding, or they're confused or concerned or just have no idea where the hell anything is going. And that could be one of the worst things that you could potentially do. You've got to believe in your strategy. You got to believe in your investments. And how do you know if you truly believe in that or not? Or if you hear the next hot stock, or, you're trying to get into all these things that you probably have no business in getting into, and now things are down 20 or 30%, then are we just going to continue to work? And I think that's where a lot of people, they feel like their strategy is, well, if things aren't going well, I'm just going to continue to work. Well, is that the right strategy? Why not retire when you want to? So you got to make sure that you're prepared to do so.
And I think the worst thing that people can do is get very emotional in times of stress, have a knee-jerk reaction. That is the possibility of doing something that will affect you for the rest of your life in retirement. So you need somebody to kind of just say, hey, things are going to get better. Just hold on. We'll maintain. But let's take a look and review your strategy once things kind of calm down and see if maybe you're in a little bit too risky a situation or not. But if you're closer to retirement, it's a lot scarier. Or if you're in retirement, it's a lot scarier. Maybe you should revisit what your strategy should be.
Yeah, and I think why not take some of the risk off the table as well, right? If you've got some protections, protected growth, then, no matter what the market's doing on the negative side, you still should be okay. And, if you have and we've said this before, but if you have all your money doing the same thing all the time, you're happy when the market's doing well, but the market's not going to do well all the time. So you've got to make sure that you've got a plan for retirement and not just your 401k or, hey, Mr. Mouse Jiggler, I'm contributing to my 401k and that's it. So that's usually not the right strategy.
And I would say to anybody is just go ahead and consult with somebody that can help you through this process, because it is a process.
The fiduciaries, Ralph and Tim at Welcome Home Financial Partners, acting in a client's best interest means that they're not going to recommend changes just for the sake of making changes. There is a happy medium between buy and hold, just stay in there because the markets always come back, and then I need to make a lot of drastic changes and realize these losses, if I'm going to be selling at these losses. It's actually a pretty broad area in there. It's going to vary from person to person, but sitting down and speaking with them, letting them assess your situation and develop that plan as it pertains to you, and making moves when the time is right. Not just, here's the thing. Yes, Ralph, under stress, it is pretty easy to react emotionally to anything, whether it is the markets or just in real life. The thing is that you don't want to make these moves, these what would amount to mistakes when it comes to your retirement, and just make these knee-jerk reactions. For whatever it's worth, the past couple of days, if you've been able to tune out the financial noise, just kind of close the stock app on your phone or what have you, and just know that you've got a plan in place that yes, the markets are going to vary from time to time, but the way that you're set up, you're not going to be affected on your day-to-day. That's probably a healthier way to go about it. The team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph and Tim Short, they can help you develop that plan so that you can, instead of worrying all the time, hopefully enjoy whatever it is that you want to do. 804-635-3550 is the number. It's how you get started. 804-635-3550 for that complimentary conversation. Begin that retirement roadmap process. You can also go online to welcomehomefp.com. Speaking of roadmaps and driving, let's talk local here for a second. Virginia is out to reduce speed-related crashes and fatalities. They're considering a new law that would require certain convicted reckless drivers to install a, quote, governor on their car. Essentially, it blocks you from going over the speed limit. Here's the thing. We can physically control our driving speed, but a lot of retirement savers feel they lack the same control, going back to, making these moves when it comes to their portfolios. How do you help them actually understand what their risk levels are? And if they find out that it is, it doesn't align with how they're actually allocated, to manage that?
Well, Chris, we were taking a look at this. I wasn't very aware of, this proposal. And I think it's a good thing, because there's a lot of bad drivers around the area, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah.
My big thing when it comes to driving is, the phones. I don't think it's necessarily reckless driving of people just driving too fast. I mean, my wife thinks I drive crazy, but I tell her I drive efficient. I want to get from point A to point B as quickly and safely as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, of course, I always, obey the speed limit. So,
of course.
But yeah, I think, a lot of people can get in their own way when it comes to retirement, and they're not really taking a look at, different risk factors. We're living right now in so many different risk factors between regulatory and legislative, and so many different things that come into it. You've got to make sure that your 401k is not going to be hit, or your retirement accounts aren't going to be hit quite as bad. But, risk management is one of those things when people go at it alone, they don't really quite pay attention to it. They say, well, guess what? Look at my account. My account's growing. This account's done X last year, or, X percent the year prior. There's a lot of times people overlook, how much risk they really actually have on the table, because it's very easy. Like we've talked about before, it's very easy to say, hey, guess what? I'm putting in $20,000 or $30,000 a year into my 401k, and look how great it's growing. Well, you've got to take into account that your employer is probably matching you, and then also too that your contribution. So maybe your performance isn't quite as good as what you think it is, but why have all that risk on the table as we're approaching retirement? We're in crazy times right now, and I guess we kind of always are, but now more than ever, there's so much happening at one particular time. You need to make sure that you've got some protection built inside your portfolio, so you can retire when you want to and how you want to, and not just have the market dictate what your retirement's going to look like.
And I would say to a lot of people, you just need to understand there's a lot of things that you need to worry about, and the only things that you need to worry about is what you got control over. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, we have a great plan and everything's working just like we planned on it. But what happens if you lose your job? just like things are going around here. People are in the federal government, they're losing their jobs. They hadn't planned on it. The number of people that call us and say, hey, hadn't planned on this. I'm 49 years old, but I'm going to take the buyout. So what should I be doing here? And that's where we come in and say, okay, these are some situations that you need to be prepared for, because guess what? You probably are going to have a tougher job trying to find a job these days than where you were in that nice, cushy job where you were let go. And not just the federal government. There's a lot of people are being downsized now because of technology or whatever reason. So you got to get prepared for that. That is a risk that most people don't want to look at down the road. So what are you going to do to be prepared for that? And risk comes in different situations. I mean, what happens if you're fixing to retire and the market did what it's done this year and lost 20% in the last 4 months? How's that going to affect you? That's the risk factor that Tim was talking about. But what about health? As we get older, guess what? More than likely, our health is going to deteriorate. So let's suppose that you're planning on retiring, today, and all of a sudden you get a health scare. Are you going to retire now? So I remember a lady that came in and called from our television program, and they had decided that he was going to retire. He was lucky enough to get a pension, and they were looking at the paperwork, and they were going to decide to just take the employee-only option because that was the most that they would get on a daily or monthly basis without taking the survivorship. So 2 weeks after they had gotten the paperwork, they hadn't signed off on it yet. He got a diagnosis with pancreatic cancer, and guess what? Within 2 months, he had passed away, but they decided to take survivorship. So those are some things that do happen, and you don't prepare for that because it's an unexpected risk factor that nobody prepares for. So just be aware. There are certain things that you don't have any control over. You just have to control your reaction to that, but I think the biggest thing for a lot of people, and going back to driving, the worst thing that I see in this area is people do not know how to merge. So now if you're in a retirement roadmap, you need to understand you have to get back off the interstate or on the interstate. You need to be able to merge, same as your retirement plan. You shouldn't be going 90 miles an hour when you're 67 years old fixing to retire, because it may not be a good thing for you at this point in time in your life.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just the Richmond area. I think it's a global pandemic, if you will, the lost art of the merge, as I like to call it.
It really depends on what you're trying to do in retirement to bring this back to the driving analogy here. Obviously, if you're merging onto the interstate, you want to make sure you're keeping up with, the traffic that's going there. But you also probably don't want to be going 80 miles an hour as you're hitting the exit. As you get closer and closer to retirement, you probably don't want to be going, the equivalent of 80 miles an hour, having so much invested in the market, because yes, we all like seeing the highs and the gains. And as you get closer and closer to retirement, in the past, close to 2 decades of pretty generous, robust markets, is another 20% in growth going to affect you significantly? Probably not. But is a 20% pullback going to affect you significantly? That is more likely. So dialing back that risk, a better understanding of that risk and how to minimize that. Not necessarily for all of your accounts, not all of your portfolio, because there's money you're going to be, not needing for 10, 15, 20 years. So you can think like a younger minded investor, but especially for your more immediacy, you want to make sure that risk is minimized. The team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph Short, Tim Short, they can help you understand that and find ways to dial back that risk, help protect you from yourself, so to speak, kind of what the governor is doing, I guess. But it all starts with that phone call, 804-635-3550. That's how it starts. A complimentary conversation with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, 804-635-3550. Or you can go online to the website. That is welcomehomefp.com. As always, we appreciate you joining us, spending part of the day here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Hope you stay safe out there. Gentlemen, appreciate the time as always. And as we wrap up, I do want to leave you with the final word.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and we appreciate your time as well. But, we've talked a lot of uncertainty and, a whole lot of change going on, estate planning, Roth conversions. These things are very important and can be very important for your retirement plan. So, if anything you heard today kind of struck a nerve, if you will, give us a call. We'd love to see what kind of value we can provide for you. We bring you into the office and we can create your very own retirement roadmap. But pick up the phone, give us a call, visit the website, attend one of the First Friday events. We'd love the opportunity to meet with you. So we want to thank everybody for listening, and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.